卿蓬佩奥这样的国务卿蓬佩奥
First, they attacked Mike Pompeo. Then Chinese media run the hippies on Steve Bannon. Why now? Why do they target you right now?
Well, I think the reason they're targeting me right now is I'm on media all the time.
Does it have anything to do with the rumor that Bannon met with a defected scientist from the Wuhan P4 lab?
I will tell you that so many good people in China that are outraged about what happened and want to belong to the whistleblower movement.
Can you confirm one way or another if such a scientist from the Wuhan Institute of Virology actually there's such a person exists who came to America?
You will see that all in due time.
Are these the dark clouds on the horizon? Will Beijing face a Tiananmen-like backlash over the virus? At this critical moment in time, I had this discussion with the host of War Room Pandemic, Steve Bannon. I'm Simone Gao, and you're watching Zooming In. Thank you very much, Mr. Bannon, for being with us today.
Okay, thanks for having me, Simone.
Okay, CCTV released a critical review on you yesterday and called you many names. Ultra-rightist, a blaster, stubborn anti-China activist with no moral integrity. Do you want to respond to this name calling?
Sure. It shows me that both our show and our effort to actually speak to the Chinese people and to speak to people throughout the world about the crimes of the CCP, of the Chinese Communist Party, is starting to hit home. The Chinese Communist Party is very nervous. What are they nervous about? They're nervous that the free people of the world will partner with or bond with Lao Beijing, old 100 names in China, and hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for the crimes they've committed that started this pandemic.
Why now? Why do they target you right now? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, I think the reason they're targeting me right now is I'm on media all the time. I've got this show, War Room Pandemic, that has a massive audience in the United States and also through the world. And remember, because of GTV and Guo News, and also often when we do the specials, Epic Times, it's subtitled in Mandarin, and we blow through the firewall and get to VPNs and actually get the truth out to the people of China. So the Chinese Communist Party is very concerned that the American people are waking up, the people in Europe are waking up throughout the world, and particularly the people in China, the Chinese citizens, understand that they have brothers and sisters throughout the world that support them in trying to achieve their freedom.
Have you received direct threats from the Chinese government?
I receive threats from the Chinese all the time. That's one of the reasons I have security. I've received threats all the time from Chinese. From I don't know if it's Chinese officials, but from people that are at least representing them from China.
Have you received threats recently?
I've received threats over the last. Listen, I've been doing this. It's just come to the attention of a lot of people, but I've been doing this for many years before I joined the president's campaign at Breitbart. In fact, the CCTV in one of the Global Times, I think, editorials today, they're hitting me in the Global Times. They're hitting me in every propaganda platform they've got. They hit me for my years at Breitbart. So I've been doing this for, I don't know, 9 or 10 years. And so the threats from the Chinese don't worry me. In fact, they empower me because I know we're having an impact. I know they're scared. And Xi should be scared, and Hua Xishan and the Chinese Communist Party should be scared because their days are numbered.
You know, at the end of the critical article released by CCTV, it raised a few questions. First, America, I'm quoting them, first, America had its first COVID-19 death on February 6th, who had no China travel history. When on earth did America first discover infected patients? So this is their question. Another question is, why does the U.S. Discriminate and ban the voices of people who are fighting the disease? And finally, Canadian media reports early cases came from the U.S., not China. How does America explain this? I mean, what are they trying to do? I mean, some of the questions
listen, it's very easy. CCTV is a propaganda arm. They're the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. Global Times is a mouthpiece. People's Daily is a mouthpiece. All the news services are just mouthpieces. They're propaganda arms of the most murderous dictatorship, and that's what it is, the most murderous dictatorship in world history. They have murdered more Chinese people than any other regime in history, including the Nazis, including the fascists in Italy, the military junta in Japan, the Soviet Union, the Soviets. This is a murderous dictatorship. And the CCTV, the commentators, and also the writers at all the other propaganda are just propagandists. So what they're trying to do is distract attention. Here's what we know for facts, is that this started in Wuhan, and here's who told us the facts was Dr. Li, the great hero of Wuhan. It was he and his colleagues that told us originally back in the last week of December that there was human-to-human transmission and community spread in Wuhan. The Chinese Communist Party knew this. And the Chinese Communist Party should understand there are many people inside those labs in both mainland China and in Hong Kong that are now talking, reaching out to whistleblowers. There are whistleblowers that are reaching out to people and giving details. So their lies and misrepresentations are not going to hold. We know the fact that they had human-to-human transmission. They had community spread in Wuhan. They knew this the last week of December. They hid that information principally because they wanted to sign the trade deal in the United States, and they wanted to go to Davos. So they kept it all under wraps until they got panicked about Chinese New Year's and then set the travel restrictions, and then obviously exploded in Wuhan because they hadn't taken the proper measures. That's why, remember, Simone, the biggest victims in this are the poor citizens in Wuhan. The Chinese Communist Party had every opportunity to stop this early on. In fact, we know that the University of Southampton in England told us that if the Chinese Communist Party had acted responsibly in the last week of December, 95% of the deaths, 95% of the agony and suffering, 95% of the economic carnage could have all been avoided. So this is right at the doorstep of President Xi and Wang Xishan and his other henchmen, and the world's going to hold them accountable. They can throw a big a temper tantrum as they want. They can say all they want to about Steve Bannon. They can say all they want to about the people associated with me. They can say all they want about the free voice of the world, Mike Pompeo and others. It's not going to change anything. This is going to be adjudicated. They're going to be stripped of their assets. They're going to be stripped of their personal assets. The Chinese Communist Party is going to be stripped of its assets. Eventually, they're going to be put on trial, a Nuremberg-type trial in Wuhan for the biological Chernobyl that they released on people of Wuhan, Hubei province, China, and then the rest of the world. There's going to be a trial. They're going to stand trial in a Nuremberg-type setting, and the citizens of Wuhan are going to sit in for mankind and render judgment on the Chinese Communist Party.
It's just amazing. I think it's amazing when all this information is out, they're still trying to push the narrative that America is the origin of the virus. It did not come from China, but America.
Listen, Simone, they're panicked. They're reaching out and striking out everywhere they can. They understand that everybody in the world knows that's a joke. They do understand. Remember, all the intelligence services, all the medical health, public health, from the World Health Organization to NIH in Canada, NIH in the National Health Service in England, NIH in Australia, NIH and CDC in the United States. Everybody's investigating this. It all leads back to Wuhan. It all leads back to the incompetence and the corruption of the Chinese Communist Party. This is a biological Chernobyl. And just like in Chernobyl, where the Soviet Union, the commissars tried to shut down any information and didn't care how many people in Chernobyl died, and they didn't care how many people in Kiev died, and they didn't care how many people in Western Europe or the rest of the world died. That's the exact same thing we have here. The regime immediately went to protect their own hold over the people. And that's why when all the facts come out, they're going to be condemned by first the Chinese people, second the people in the United States, and third the citizens of the world.
You talk about the lawsuits. I wonder what those lawsuits will actually lead to. I mean, what's the possibility of the CCP actually compensate the world? I think the possibility is pretty low. But you said we can seize their assets in the United States. What else?
Well, you're wrong there. The probabilities are very high. We can do exactly like, first off, Congress, we can move very quickly. And there's a huge groundswell right now to do JASTA, to basically strip the Chinese Communist Party, just like we did the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for 9/11. Remember, there's a $50 billion lawsuit right now between 9/11 and the 9/11 victims and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia about 9/11. We have full rights to strip the Chinese Communist Party of their sovereign immunity, and to have state governments go after them, individuals go after them, the federal government go after them. The Chinese Communist Party is going to pay tens of trillions of dollars for this. They're going to pay. They're going to pay until they're bankrupt. And not just that. And this is the warning to Xi and Wan Xishan and all their gangsters. All of their assets in the United States, in London, and throughout Western Europe is all going to be seized. They're not going to have any wealth. All they've done is steal from the people in China, convert it to dollars, get it out of the country, put it in real estate in New York, real estate in Los Angeles, real estate in London, in the West End of London, in Belgravia, right, in Kensington, all of those places, Knightsbridge. They own all this real estate throughout the world, Manhattan. Okay, it's all going to be seized from them. The people of the world are going to demand compensation for this. The people of the world are totally innocent here, and quite frankly, one of the things we're fighting for is to make sure the people of Wuhan and Hubei province, the Chinese citizen, get appropriate compensation from the Chinese Communist Party. This is going to bankrupt the Chinese Communist Party. That's why they're throwing out these wild things. Oh, you can't do this. No legal system. They're finished. The people of the world are uniting to take them down. They are finished. They're a group of gangsters that have run and destroyed China. They've destroyed the Chinese people. They run a police state, and you can see that every way you want to turn. They run a gulag, right? First, the firewall is going to come down. Then the peoples of the world, the laws of the world are going to entangle them. And I got to tell you, we have plenty of laws here in the United States. You already have some of the smartest attorneys general. You have some of the smartest strike lawyers. Everybody's getting their lawsuits ready. The Chinese Communist Party is going to be tied up for years in litigation. And this is one of the things that's going to bring them down because they're going to be bankrupt. And Wan Xishan and Xi personally should understand, and their families, all your assets are going to be seized. And so I think anybody says it's not going to happen is just fooling themselves. It's already a big effort underway to start this process right now. And then the people in China are going to turn against them. They're going to be overthrown. They're going to stand trial in Wuhan in a Nuremberg-type trial. They're going to be found guilty. And then the Chinese people can decide what they want to do with them.
You told me in your last interview that this virus will take down the Communist Party. Do you think America is ready for an immediate collapse of the CCP? In other words, is does the American leadership want the CCP to collapse right now?
The American people, most importantly, look at the polling, the American people. Remember, it's the American people that take the lead. It's the American people that put Donald Trump into office. It's the backing of the American people that led to the confrontation with the CCP. The American people they're tired of it. They don't have jobs. They don't have pension funds. They're not out seeing their sports. They're not going to church. They can't do Ramadan. They can't do Passover. They can't go worship the risen Christ because a group of atheistic, materialistic communists, right, decided to allow a deadly virus to come out of their labs and to basically destroy the city of Wuhan, destroy Chinese people. We have no idea how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of innocent Chinese are dead. How much economic havoc it's wreaked in China. That's all behind the firewall. The days of the CCP, their days are numbered. And they understand the righteous indignation of the entire peoples of the world are going to bond with Lao Baoxing, old 100 names, and first bankrupt them and then overthrow them.
Now you know that the U.S. and China's economies are so intertwined, and the worry is, if the China's economy collapse, that will have a big impact on the U.S. economy. Do you think that's is still a concern? I mean, consider the economy, the current economy, the status.
We don't have to have the economy in China collapse. What we have to do is have the Chinese Communist Party collapse. There's no American, and me particularly, that wants the Chinese economy to collapse. We're big supporters of the Chinese people. Remember, the Chinese people are among the most decent, hardworking people on earth. And when you see the Chinese people go to Hong Kong with English common law, go to Taiwan with English common law, or Singapore, or Samoan, particularly all of your fellow Chinese are here in the United States, they thrive, they prosper. When you give them the rule of law and allow them to stand on their own as free people, they thrive throughout the world, whether that's in Europe, London, the United States, Hong Kong. Look at it. The Chinese are not only prosperous, they're happy, right? Why can't the Chinese be prosperous and happy and free in China? It's ridiculous. It's racist. The Chinese Communist Party is the biggest racist organization in history. They treat the Chinese people like animals. They don't allow them free access to information in the world. Chinese people are among the most smartest people I've ever met. Look at all the people I know here in the United States and in Hong Kong and in Taiwan and all my friends in mainland China. The Chinese are incredibly hardworking, very scholarly, very up to date on what the world's doing, and yet the Chinese Communist Party treats them like animals. They won't even let them interact with the world on the internet. They think they treat them like children. They keep saying they're not ready for democracy. China's not ready for democracy. Well, guess what? If India, in Europe, in the United States, in Mexico, and Brazil, right? If they're ready for democracy, hey, guess what? China's ready for democracy, and the Chinese people are ready for democracy. That all of this grief, all of this agony, all of this death, all of this destruction is because of the Chinese Communist Party and President Xi, Wan Xishan, and his other henchmen. And they can run as far as they want to run. They can say everything they want to do. They can try to suck up to all the elites in the West and then party at Davos. And all. It doesn't make a difference. It's not relevant. The peoples of the world demand retribution, okay? And they're going to stand before the peoples of the world and have to account for their crimes and account for their behavior.
I'm glad you told me how you feel about the Chinese people. We have talked a lot. You have shown your respect and all that to the Chinese people. Tell me, this is what the Chinese Communist Party has been confusing. They slander you and they call you like a China haters. You just hate all Chinese people. But that's just not the case. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Your China experience.
Well, I went to, and by the way, it doesn't fly because every day, remember, I broadcast every day and it's subtitled in Mandarin and it blows through the firewall. So the Chinese people know I have a great fondness for them. As a very young man, the whole reason I joined the Navy as a young boy, right, in my late teens, early 20s, was to basically go to China, to go serve in the Pacific Fleet. I was born on the East Coast in a Navy town, Norfolk. But I never wanted to serve in the Atlantic Fleet. I always wanted to go to the Pacific. The reason I wanted to go to the Pacific was to go to China. And so I got assigned.
Why did you want to go to China?
I just always been fascinated since a very young child with the Chinese people and with China. I read all the histories of China, all the books about China. I just always had a great affinity for Asia, a great affinity for China. I studied World War II as a young boy very, very closely, the war in the Pacific. I had always wanted to serve in the 7th Fleet, the great fleet of the United States that basically defeated Imperial Japan. I have a great fondness for the Japanese people too, so I just wanted to go for all Asian cultures, but particularly China. And a very important moment in my life is when my destroyer pulled into Hong Kong. I think it was in 1977. We pulled into Hong Kong for the first time, and I went ashore, and it was just amazing. I loved Hong Kong, loved the Chinese people, and I've had a great affinity. I've gone back and forth in China over my time at Goldman Sachs, my own firm, which we did in partnership with a Japanese trading company. I spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, and then later as it opened back up, I founded companies in China and actually lived for a short period of time in Shanghai. We had a headquarters of one of my companies. I actually owned a cable TV called Games TV. It was headquartered in Shanghai, and I actually lived in the French concession. And so I just have a great fondness and a great affinity for the Chinese people, and love the culture, love the society. And it's always upset me that the Chinese people are not free. And the excuse that was always given, well, they're not ready for their freedom. They're not ready for democracy. They're not. And I said, they're among the best people I've ever met in my life. They're hardworking. They're very family oriented. They're very decent people. And I said, when you see them with democracy in Hong Kong, you see them with democracy in Taiwan, you see them with democracy in Singapore, you see them with democracy in the United States and in England, and they thrive. You give the Chinese people the rule of law, and you give them democracy, and there's nothing that can stop them. And that's the dilemma we have today, is about the freedom of the Chinese people. That's what this all gets down to. The Chinese Communist Party is a scourge on the world, and they're principally a scourge on the Chinese people. They run essentially a gulag with slave labor, and that has to be stopped. We've seen now what their true face is. This pandemic has ripped their face away, and the ridiculous nature they come after me and other people every day just makes them look more and more absurd throughout the world. The facts of the matter are going to condemn them. They're eventually going to be put on trial. They're going to be put on trial in Wuhan on a Nuremberg-type trial, and they're going to have to answer for all their crimes against humanity.
So, I mean, let's go back to the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese economy a little bit. If the Chinese Communist Party collapses today, you don't think the Chinese economy will collapse with it, right?
Definitely will not collapse with it. You're going to have some perturbations as China reorganizes and gets a new government. But it'll be like Eastern Europe and these places after the fall of the Soviet Union. Your freedom, but think how great it would be with the Chinese people being free, having democracy and having true freedom, and not having to have a firewall, not having to have, social credit scores, and not having everybody like the great hero Dr. Lee having to force tortured and then have to sign a confession that he was a rumor monger. All that goes away. What may the economy go down slightly? Yeah, the economy may go down. It's not going to be perfect at first, but look, the economy is collapsing in China anyway because of the actions of the Chinese Communist Party and what they did in this pandemic. The first quarter in China has been terrible. The second quarter has been terrible. The factories aren't back up, and the workers don't feel safe. Remember, you have another whole wave of this in China. And it's not affecting the guys in Beijing because they have total quarantine. If you go out to the fifth ring or sixth ring, you can't get back into the area around the Forbidden City. It's like a quarantine, right? Because they want to protect. They know how deadly this virus is. So this shows you the hypocrisy of the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. No, might the Chinese economy go through some rough times after they fall? Maybe, but the China will come roaring back. And the reason is a free China, right, is something that works for the entire world. If we want to have peace and prosperity for the entire world, it's very simple. It is time to free the Chinese people from this dictatorship. And the elites in the West have made money off this. They finance this. They've given us technology. It's time now that those elites have to be held accountable. They have to be brushed aside. The peoples of the world have to unite to help assist. Only the Chinese people can free themselves, but to assist the Chinese people in their freedom.
There had been information circulating on the internet that you met with a senior scientist from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, look, I don't want to get into what the internet says and doesn't say, but I will tell you that there are so many good people in China that are outraged about what happened and want to belong to the whistleblower movement. So people in mainland China, people in Hong Kong, other people that know the facts have reached out to whistleblowers, and there are people that really want to make sure the truth gets out there and the facts get out there, and the Chinese Communist Party can't lie about this. So the Chinese Communist Party ought to be very worried about the citizens of China, the people of China, who are tired of their lies, tired of their brutality, tired of the way they treat the Chinese people. The people in China are fed up with this. They're tired of it. They're tired of being treated like animals. They're tired of being second-class people throughout the world. How can people in India, how can people in the Middle East, how can people in Africa, how can people in Europe, in Mexico, in Brazil, all of South America, the United States, Canada, how can all these people, have free access to the internet, free access to talk to anybody in the world you want to, free access to be able to communicate. Yet the Chinese are treated like the North Koreans and like people in Iran, right? They're treated like slaves and they're treated like animals, right? That they can't have free commerce. They can't have a free relationship. They can't have information go back and forth like they're children. The Chinese people are not children. The China is an ancient civilization. It's a noble people. It's a good people. It is time that they are free. It is an outrage in the 21st century, given everything we went through in the 20th century, that the people in China live under a totalitarian dictatorship. That's what this pandemic, the good that can come out of this pandemic is the freedom of the Chinese people. And people have to understand, if you support the Chinese Communist Party, you're a racist. If you support the Chinese Communist Party, you're a nativist, you're a xenophobe, because you are supporting the worst people on earth to suppress the 1.4 billion people in China. And you're going to be held accountable. Anybody that backs the regime is going to be held accountable. Okay? There's absolutely no doubt. This regime is going to fall just like the Nazis fell, just like Mussolini and the fascists fell, just like the commissars in the Soviet Union fell. They always fall. Okay? The Chinese Communist Party is the next one to get kicked into the dustbin of history.
So I'm going to press a little bit. Can you confirm one way or another if such a scientist from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, actually there such a person exists who came to America?
I'd say you will see that all in due time.
Okay, and this person will testify.
I didn't say that. I said you'll see either that's true or false over due time. I don't want to respond to internet. If I had to respond to every internet rumor, I'd spend all my time just responding to internet rumors, right? So I just think just see how things develop. But I will tell you this: there are many, many, many good people in China that are outraged about what happened. They're outraged by the Chinese Communist Party suppressing information. They're outraged about Chinese Communist Party destroying evidence. They're outraged by what the Chinese Communist Party did and looked the other way and allowed Wuhan to be destroyed and the citizens of Wuhan to be destroyed. So every family that hasn't been able to basically mourn their loved ones that died, everyone that can't go to a tomb sweeping ceremony once a year because they don't know if they've got the right set of ashes or the right body. That's all because of what Beijing did to you. So I don't respond to internet rumors, but I think over time you'll see that many, many people in China want to get the truth out.
Okay. We have talked about the CCP this whole time, but now I want to talk about America. You know, American CDC has a branch in China. NIH gave $3.7 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. What do you think are the nature of such partnership?
I think that throughout the world, World Health Organization, BARDA, NIH in Australia, people have tried. And listen, the reason is that the rest of the world wants to help the Chinese people. This was all because they thought it would be benefits to the Chinese people. We'll have to review that all over time. Right now, people are investigating and looking at the grants. This was cash that was given to do research in China. That's all part of this investigation is going on right now. And you're going to find out the World Health Organization, places in Europe, in Australia, the United States, probably others, right? Then we'll find out all that. But the takeaway is that all that was to help the Chinese people. Remember, one of the things that people in the West have always tried to do is understanding how bad SARS was, is to make sure that they could be some sort of assistance to the Chinese people to make sure there was never another SARS outbreak. So whether it was giving money to the Hong Kong University or to others, we'll see over time. But the Chinese Communist Party to flip this and try to make it part of their propaganda just shows you how evil they are. It shows you they don't care about the Chinese people. All they care about is themselves. So all this will come out over time. And the way I look at it, it was money too. People got to be held accountable for it, but it was money basically given to make sure that the SARS-like virus never came upon the Chinese people again.
So to what degree would the American institutions, NIH and CDC, know what's going on in the Wuhan lab, to your knowledge?
I don't know if they knew anything. I mean, we'll have to find that over time. I think if you look at these grants were given to basically back up the research of the lead investigators, whether it was Australian NIH, whether it was American NIH, whether it was World Health Organization, right? I think they might have had a reference lab in Hong Kong that was to oversee things or at least be some sort of coordination effort. But obviously the investigations, all the research was going to be done by Chinese scientists in Wuhan. So we'll have to see over time.
So you don't think, I mean, even if the American government gave the Wuhan lab $3.7 million, the American doesn't have responsibility for what might have gone wrong in the Wuhan lab?
No, because I don't think it's a zero chance because there was never any agreement from the Chinese Communist Party or Wuhan that there would be any supervision by World Health Organization in providing these funds. This is normally done throughout the world where you provide funds to actually do research in different areas. This is just like World Health Organization, NIH in America, NIH in Australia, in France and the United Kingdom. They have grants throughout the world, but that's to let scientists in those countries perform their experiments. I mean, one of the things, this is why I call it a biological Chernobyl. Clearly, the Chinese Communist Party did not put in the controls, did not have the management in Wuhan, in both the CDC, the P2 lab, and also the P4 lab of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, WIV. But obviously, there wasn't the level of supervision there should have been. And one of the reasons you see is you can't even get information out of there. The Chinese Communist Party controls it. We still today haven't had access to it. We still today don't even know if we've got the right genome sequence. You still today don't know if you've got the original virus. And if we know any information has all been blocked by the CCP. Remember, the CCP went to the wet lab on January 1st and bleached it and washed it down before any investigation. Right? The reason they did that, they wanted to make sure they got rid of any evidence in case you could prove that there's no chance it came from the wet market. That's why instead of cordoning it off and make sure there was an international investigation, everybody can see it, they bleached it right away and washed it down right away to hide their guilt. Just like all the papers they did and everything was withdrawn from the first phase of providing information, they stopped all that. They destroyed information. This is exactly how they ran Wuhan. This is exactly how they ran that lab and the other labs, right? And people are going to find out, I think, over time, they were doing experiments there they should not have been doing with lack of supervision. Exactly analogous to what happened in Chernobyl. Remember, Chernobyl came about because they did an experiment on the reactor they weren't well trained for, not prepared for, and not supervised. It was that training exercise, right, that led to the meltdown of the reactor. And what did the Soviet Union, what did the communists in Moscow do? They tried to first make sure that no information got out outside for their guilt because they did not effectively manage this. It's the exact same thing in Wuhan. That's why they hate when I say it's a biological Chernobyl, because it is a biological Chernobyl. They also understand that Chernobyl is one of the things that led at the end to the collapse and overthrow of the Soviet Union, of the regime. And they understand in Beijing this is going to lead to their overthrow. Remember, they're at each other's throats right now. The Reuters just had a story about how Xi and Wang Qishan, the elites, are very worried because now there's a whole global resistance to them, led by people like me that are holding them accountable like during Tiananmen Square. But they're afraid that it's bigger than Tiananmen Square. Where was that story leaked from? The Ministry of State Security. And what does that show you? That the criminals in Beijing are at each other's throats. I think you're looking at people that want to overthrow Xi and also people that want to support Xi. But what the takeaway is that they're at each other's throats in Beijing. Why? Because they're a group of criminals. And this is how criminals react. They're at each other's throats. They're very nervous about the entire regime collapsing because they saw what happened in Chernobyl. And this is just a biological Chernobyl. And as much as they spin, as much as they lie, as much as they try to accuse other people, we're coming for them. And the facts are on our side. And that's what's driving them nuts.
When you talked about the Wuhan lab has been doing experiments that they shouldn't have been doing, what experiments are you talking about?
I think they were doing gain of function experiments and maybe even other experiments beyond that. Beyond that, maybe even experiments where they were actually, and you're seeing a lot of, Dr. Sean Lin and others are coming out with was certain parts of the proteins, mess with humanly. You got IIT, the scientists in India at the India Institute of Technology. You have the Nobel Prize winner who found the French doctor who found who was the one of the individuals on the team that found this big development in HIV back in 2014. He won the Nobel Prize for this. He's come out and said, hey, there's zero chance this was not manufactured. You've had Russian scientists come out. Look, I'm not a biologist. This is not my line of work, but I'm smart enough to understand when smart people are talking about this and you see directionally where it heads, that's all going to have to be investigated. It's being investigated right now. And so the Chinese Communist Party can try to spin it, can try to call people names. It doesn't matter what they do. Here's the thing. It's out of their control. And that's the beauty of it. They can have their running dogs in the West try to call people out, It doesn't matter. The weight of the evidence is so compelling and the destruction is so huge and so global that the peoples of the world are going to hold them accountable. And that's going to lead for the Chinese people to actually overthrow these. And you can see in Beijing right now, there's tremendous tension in Beijing right now among the elites as they point fingers at each other. Who caused this? How did this happen? Why is this mishandled? This is exactly what happened in Moscow back during the times of Chernobyl. You're seeing the exact same thing play out here.
So to the best of your knowledge, can we rule out lab-made altogether?
I do not think you can rule, and I don't think you can rule anything out until you have definitive reports and until people have gotten in those labs and, quite frankly, until they've taken every person in the lab and interviewed them and really put them through the drill here of getting all the information, until we have full access to the labs, until you have full access to the series of labs, until you have full access to the biological weapons program that the PLA runs, until you have full access to everything like that, people can't be definitive on this. Remember, we know very little about this virus right now. We're just finding out about this virus, the way it mutates. So this is all at the very beginning, but that information is all going to come out. It's not going to be withheld, just like Chernobyl. We know all the details of Chernobyl Day. In fact, they made a 5-hour, HBO movie about it in excruciating detail because all the facts are out. The facts here are going to come out. And the Chinese Communist Party can destroy as much information they want, destroy as much evidence as they want. All the facts are going to come out here. And the number one problem the Chinese Communist Party should start worrying about is not Steve Bannon and not other people that are populists or nationalists throughout the world. The number one problem they should worry about is their own people. Their own people who know their lies and misrepresentations, their own people that know what happened in those labs, their own people who knew how they lied to people and tried to have a misdirection play here so that people wouldn't pay attention to it while they let people in Wuhan die. This is a regime that wouldn't blink an eye to have 30 or 40 million innocent Chinese die. Okay? Everybody knows that. The Chinese people know that. And that's why they've got to be leave the stage now and go into the dustbin of history as every other murderous dictatorship in modern times has done.
Well, these are all my questions. Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Bannon?
No, just, Epic Times doing a great job. And here's the thing. This is at the very beginning of this. We're not going to go away. People in the United States are not going to go away. In Europe, and we love the Chinese people. We understand it's an incredibly tough struggle for them. But this is going to end with a happy ending. And the happy ending is going to be the removal of the Chinese Communist Party and the freedom of the Chinese people.
I do have one more question for you. What is your favorite Chinese food? Is it dumpling?
It's not dumpling. It's Peking duck. I love all Chinese food, but I'm particularly a sucker for Peking duck. Perfect Peking duck is I think it's my favorite food of everything, even the American food. Okay. I love Chinese food. I would eat Chinese food every day of the week if I had access to great Chinese food. It's very difficult in the United States.
Yes, that's true. Peking duck. That's my favorite, one of my favorites too. Thank you so much, Mr. Bannon, and you take very good care of yourself, okay?
Thank you, Simone. Thank you very much, and the people at the Epic Times. Really, really honored to be on.
Thank you.